Hey, what's up, guys? It's METAGAMESGX here, and we are going to do a video talking about Mulcharmy and Branded. So, this is something that I've talked about a lot on stream and in my videos before, but basically, since Mulcharmy Fuwalos came out, I feel like this has been a staple in Branded for the most part. I mean, there might have been pockets in some of the previous formats, like whether it was when Pure Ryzeal was really good, towards the end of last format. I feel like people were starting to run Peruli over Foolos, but that's neither here nor there. I think Foolos is the next incarnation of Maxx, and for that reason, alone, it is the best hand trap in the game. I think Ash Blossom is around there. I think Ash Blossom's definitely the best utility hand trap in the game, and we'll get into that with how it relates to Branded. But I think Foolos still has a place in Branded, which is a deck that traditionally does not run hand traps, right? This is a deck that it really prospers in a format where it can comfortably run board breakers and do well into it, because Branded has a very good, way, like, in-engine board breaking. So, the hand traps tend to conflict with the deck because you want to use your resources to pump up your engine to board break, essentially. Whether it's normal summon Aluber, chain forbidden droplet, and then when they go imperm on the Aluber, right? So you dodge the imperm and then you break their board while also getting your search, stuff like that, right? If you have an Ash Blossom in hand, if you top deck Ash Blossom when you need like a starter recursion piece in a deck that has a lot of bricks in it, for the most part. I think running a ton of hand traps usually isn't the play. I don't think it's impossible, and we've seen people on my channel, myself included, who have used hand traps in the past formats to good success with Branded. I think you just have to have a good theory behind it. But where does Fuwalos fit into all of this? That is the question, because Fuwalos is a card that, gives you a draw for every time your opponent special summons a monster from the deck or the extra deck. This is effectively most of the coverage of what you would want Maxx to be, but this is only for the most part on your opponent's turn, right? Like, sometimes you'll be able to top deck Foolos for the most part and then use it on your opponent's turn, especially in draw phase against IP Masquerena. That's pretty good, right? Or, something that will allow your opponent to link summon or fusion summon. For instance, Branded, I think having Foolos on your own turn for Branded when Branded went first is actually quite good. Don't tell the non-branded players, guys. But Foolos also, allows you to be able to go second and still be able to play the game against a lot of these decks that put up end boards that are impossible to break, essentially. So for this format in particular, it's currently May 2025. We just had YCS Providence, and this showed us that Maliss and Mitsurugi, Ryzeal, and other Ryzeal variants are the best decks. So for that reason alone, they make very good end boards, and they go into their extra deck a lot. Fiendsmith Ryzeal, which just got second, that gets really hurt by Foolos if they go normal summon ice and you chain Foolos, right? You at least give them 2 draws probably, and they end on a really mangled board. And similarly with Maliss, where Maliss has to link summon through their whole extra deck to really be able to play the game. And if they're able to play the game, right? Like, if they're able to go full combo, they're going to set up one of the best boards in the whole game. You will not be able to play through a Maliss board unless you have the perfect combination of starters and board breakers going second. And even then, the Maliss combo gives them like draw 4 or 5. So, the issue becomes hand traps at that point, and they get to run the best hand traps in the game, whether it's Dominus Impulse or Bystials, right? So, as a branded player, you're looking at that and it's like, I don't want my Maliss player to have things like Impulse and Bystials. And if they are, I'm going to need card advantage to deal with it. So that's where Foolos comes in, because Foolos is a card that I've argued, like I mentioned before, since it came out, that it should be a staple in Branded. I think, there was some drama with some people on YouTube, on Twitter, when people were saying if you're playing GWC, you're behind in maliss. And I'm gonna say this right now as kind of a meme, right? Like, this isn't too serious, so my Twitter keyboard anime PFP warriors, don't get too hyped. I will say that also that, you know, if you're not playing Foolos and branded, you are behind. I just made a short about this also. Because I think if you're not running Foolos and branded, you're just conceding the fact that you will lose every game one against Maliss and Mermal going second. And I think that's just not a tenable plan. I think if you're trying to win the game, you know, play branded in an era, you know, 3 years out basically, right? From where it was. I think that, you know, in really its prime, I'd say that you need to adapt with the times, and Foolos is a perfect card in branded too. So I want to show you guys kind of why Foolos works so well in branded. I think it's a pseudo, you know, extender almost. It's not really an extender, but it's a card that can be very well recycled into your deck. That actually fits into your deck because you're able to use it for discards. You know, branded has plenty of things that discard, whether it's Fallen of Albaz, branded opening, Forbidden Droplet, you know, and my favorite, branded in High Spirits, because branded in High Spirits is a card that says, sorry, it's my foreign copy, people, but, you know, Google branded in High Spirits. I typically say the names of the cards. A lot of people are like, oh, why do you use foreign cards? It's like, well, I'm talking about the card in the video. So please let me know down below, though, if you guys want me to get more English cards to show off on camera. But branded High Spirits basically says you can reveal one card in your hand, and then you can send a monster from your extra deck and itself to the graveyard that with the corresponding type with 2500 attack or defense. So Foolos is a winged beast, and what else is a winged beast in the branded extra deck that has 2500 defense or attack? Well, Renum the Striking Dragon. So this card is crazy also because this card is a pseudo extender. This thing is an end board piece, so at the very least, if you have Brandon and High Spirits going first and the Foolos, you know, let's just say game one, you still have your Fooloses and going first, because obviously you side out Foolos always going first, right, for the most part. But, and if you can't, you should have side panders that allow you to. But Brandon and High Spirits allows you to send Foolos to the graveyard and then Renum to the graveyard, and then you have the Renum set up. At this point, if you have any other starter, you could always just search out the Albion the Shrouded Dragon, because Shrouded Dragon will get you a draw and send the Fallen of Albaz to the graveyards so that it's in the graveyard with Renum. And that already, like, let's just say you already have Branded Fusion access. You already have Normal Summon Aluber in your hand. Great. Okay, well, now if your opponent ashes or imperms your Aluber, or, you know, ashes your Branded Fusion, okay, well, at the very least, you have, you know, Renum in the graveyard with Albaz. You probably have some discards. You can summon Albaz on your opponent's turn. You know, every deck is going to have a light or dark monster. Or if you run things like Sprined, which is the machine that allows you to fuse off monsters that were special summoned on your opponent's turn. Also, Titanclad's a decent target for a general target. You know, so something like that, but you'll be able to remove a monster with Albaz on your opponent's turn through hand traps, right? Or just as an additional interruption, just because you had Mulcharmy. I think having hand traps that work with High Spirits or like Allura Darkness is very important in branded. There's not a lot of dark hand traps, so unfortunately, or fortunately, Ash Blossom for that instance is actually a lot worse than Foolos in branded, I think, especially in a format without Maxi. I think Ash Blossom is near, you know, just bad in branded. It's good if you run a propensity of hand traps, and what I mean by that, of course, is a lot of hand traps in your branded deck. I've seen people run 60 card branded with like 20 hand traps, or like 42 card branded with like 15, 16 hand traps, and they've made it work, but you have to make some serious engine, you know, deletions. You'll have to make some serious engine concessions at that point to run a bunch of hand traps like Ash, because if you see Ash with like High Spirits with no other extender, you're going to feel really bad. But if you see Ash with a couple hand traps and no other extenders, okay, well, at least you can skip your opponent's turn and then like potentially draw like a Nadir branded opening or a Luber. But so for that instance, I also think Foolos, your deck, you could just throw in Foolos. You could run a bunch of board breakers and Foolos. And for that instance, I think Foolos is very good in branded because you're drawing board breakers instead of hand traps. Now, you might be like, oh, Chris, why would you want to not draw hand traps off of Foolos? And I've heard this concept talked about before by other like better players than me, but I want to talk about it myself because I feel like been able to elaborate on it just playing with Foolos so much in branded, which is a deck with board breakers. Drawing, and then I also played it in Ryzeal, so there was kind of like the comparison. In Ryzeal, you'll draw Ash and Imperm, and even in my hand trap branded version, I kind of noticed this. You need to draw these hand traps on time. You need to draw Ash before they go Requiem. If you don't, what's the point of the Ash Blossom? They're gonna set up like interruptions or already do what they need to do, right? If you draw board breakers, okay, you keep going. I'm gonna use Super Poly. I'm gonna use Forbidden Droplet on your turn, or even in a deck like Branded that has extenders or in-engine board breaking, even Allure of Darkness drawing it off of that is not bad too, because Allure of Darkness is great going second, right? Card advantage is always good. You hit a Tragedy or a Mercurier, you're off to the races. Super Poly is probably the best board breaker this format that people aren't on because not a lot of decks can run it, and it turns out Branded is a deck where their whole extra deck is Super Poly targets. You can run the traditional Stapelia or Garura, but Mirror Jade just says any extra deck monster, essentially, right? Plus an Albaz. So let me just normal summon an Albaz and break, take that Omni Negate from you, right? Or normal summon the Despia, and then make Proskinion and steal your Ryzeal Detonator from the graveyard and pop a card when you try to interact with me next, right? So Branded's just drawing better cards in general than most decks. Now, there are some decks that run board breakers with Foolos, but most don't. What is Maliss drawing off of Foolos going second? They're drawing hand traps. Okay. They get to run Impulse. Not every deck gets to run Impulse. Impulse is such a good hand trap, I think, where it's applicable literally at any point in the game. So you could draw it going, for top deck or going first, right? It's very good either way. But they don't run board breakers. Some builds run Droplet, but if we look at the YCS Providence breakdown, we can see that not a lot of people ran any board breakers with Foolos, which I feel like is a little incorrect, right? Like they're just hoping to draw the One of Talents, and obviously I'm not a YCS winner or topper, but I think it might be a good idea to think about running droplets or something. I think going forward, people will be with like Yummy in the format, which just craters to a Dark Ruler, right? So droplet's gonna come back and do its thing, right? So Foolos is already, I'm setting it up to be a really solid, versatile pick in Branded because you can use it with Engine, right? A lot of people were talking about, I think Steven Santoli said he ran the Horus package and Crystron because he was able to discard and actually use his Mulcharmies. I think he ran like 6 or 9 Mulcharmies in the main. Between the main and side, either way. The Horus cards gave him discards in a deck that didn't have discards. We have multiple discards, right? So that should already lend credence to the fact that there are grounds to run Mulcharmy and Branded, a deck that does not traditionally run hand traps. And why it is better than other hand traps in Branded, right? Nibiru's not a high spirits target. Ash is not a high spirits target. Hopefully one day we'll get those as high spirits targets, and then maybe we'll be able to use it. But also I think Foolos doubles for other things as well, right? If you're able to recycle the Renum off of Retribution or something, you have Foolos in the graveyard to go, Branded and white or something to make a Renum on the crackback, of course. So I think it being a winged beast is not bad because it also has slight synergistic typing with the Renum. So you can actually fuse off with it, whether it's like with, a polymerization in the most basic sense, or Branded and red, or Cartesia fuse off like Albaz and, your Foolos, you can make a Renum, right? Like, this is actually something that's come up in like very niche cases for me. And Foolos does have that. Now, this isn't the reason to run Foolos. The reason to run Foolos is so you don't get FTK'd against Malice and Mermal. Decks that, Mermal, look at Mermal, right? Like, we were just talking about Malice. They make an unbreakable board where, like, yeah, you can see the Super Poly remove off most of their interaction outside the White Binder and Lingaribo, which probably doesn't matter against Branded too much. But they're going to have a bunch of hand traps. So I think having the extenders with Foolos is really important, right? If Branded's on more than 6 cards going second, you're doing pretty good, I think. Because the more cards Branded has, it gets really dangerous, right? Because if you give, a lot of people will take the Mulcharmy challenge against Branded. Like, some people on Mouse will take the Mulcharmy challenge because they're like, okay, what's Mouse doing? They don't have board breakers to go second, and they can't go second with their engine. Branded can. And Branded runs board breakers. So it's just like, your card quality that you're drawing is just way higher with Foolos, I think, than most other decks. On top of the hand trap dilemma. And plus, the hand traps put you down cards, right? So, like, board breakers don't, essentially. Like, you could draw hand traps off of Foolos and start on less cards than you did, right? Than you drew, right? And then, once again, against Mermal, they are a deck that hand rips, right? If you go second against Mermal and you don't have a Mulcharmy or a Droll Lockbird, you are going to be in trouble. And I've actually always said to people, Droll Lockbird is a great card if you don't own Mulcharmies. Obviously, Mulcharmy has gotten reprinted, so I think they're like $10 a copy at base. It's crazy. I get some comments still, people thinking it's $100 a copy. I'm like, no, it's $10, right? Which is a lot better for sure. So I think, Droll Lockbird ends up actually being like a good replacement for Mulcharmy because it does the same kind of function against Mermal, which is a deck that you want to stop. Now, Mermal's not that popular. It only got 1 spot in the last top 32 of a YCS, and I wouldn't expect it to be at every event, but I think as the format progresses and people get bored of just running Malice and Mitsurugi, I think you'll see a little bit more Mermal and, post-ban list. Maybe we'll even see more, so we'll see what happens there, obviously, but I think that Droll Lockbird, and things like Foolos are necessary for Mermal, because if you Foolos a Mermal player, you are going to start drawing cards for the cards they're hand ripping off of you, and then you're also going to draw board breakers to deal with their really good board. So it's, it's just a win-win against that deck that you need to see. Even Perulia, Meowls, and for that instance, I am siding and sometimes even debating on maining Meowls and Perulia unbranded. I think you could very well do that in branded. I think you've seen other players run like 9 Mulcharmies in the main. I think that's okay in branded. There are high spirits targets for Meowls and Perulia. For Perulia is Tearlament's Fuwalos. I should have the card out, but I don't. And then also for Meowls, it is the Brigand, which is a branded dragon that allows you to search basically a beast or a Fallen of Albaz in the end phase, or special summon it so you can get Kit in the end phase, which is kind of neat, and do stuff like that. So, they aren't the best targets. I think I think Brigand's way better than Fuwalos, but hey, even Fuwalos, like, it's a body in the graveyard, so you don't have to discard off of Lubellion, right? When you're going branded fusion, you can just banish it off the Albion and make the Mirror Jade without discarding. So there's still, like, little synergies there. I wouldn't main Meowls or Perulia, but your mileage may vary. It's something you could very well do, I think, in branded. Because once again, just the card quality is very good. But I think Foolos, for the most part, is the required one because it's going to hit the most. Against most decks, you're going to get at least like 2 draws probably, or you're going to make their board be like basically suboptimal, right? That's the other just big factor of Mulcharmy, is that when you resolve one, that your opponent just does not end up actually having an answer a lot of the time. So they're going to have to end up, like, if it's Ryzeal or even Mitsurugi, they're just going to have to end on an Ame or a Detonator, right? Which you can obviously just deal with like one or 2 cards. So that's really good. Talents went to 1. So there's just a lot less, Mulcharmy's a lot better now because you don't have to shotgun it in the draw phase. You can just, like, go main phase, like, wait for them to go Requiem and chain, or sorry, wait for them to link off into Requiem, and then you can go Foolos, or you can wait for, a interaction point that you can chain Foolos, so you guarantee the draw. Yeah, you can play into the 1 of talents and Albaz at 1, right? So this card's going to be resolving, and you're not going to be as much punished for it, so it's just like way more free than it was last format, for instance, with Crossout also at 1, for instance. Thrust is in the game, but not a lot of people are maining it, and you know, some people are siding it, but you know, so that's always a thing to consider games 2 and 3 for sure if you want to play into Thrust. If you see your opponent on Thrust, don't Mulcharmy them unless it's Maliss or Mermal where you have to. That's the thing, sometimes you just have to, right? And if they thrust you, they thrust you. You can run things like Nadir and High Spirits to potentially play through it after you break through the board. That's why I do like Evenly, because it clears the bodies, and then you can go Nadir and then play through dimensional things like Barrier, which I don't think a ton of people are on, but some people might be, because there's just like a lot better options right now. So yeah, that's why you should be running Foolos, why you're behind if you're not on Foolos and branded. Did I miss anything? I think, you know, once again, it can just be fusion fodder. It's just, overall, it's a very solid card in branded. I think if it was like a dragon, obviously, it'd be way better, but it's a wing beast. We got Renum with it, which is very solid, which is an interruption because you can guarantee search the shrouded. And then also it just helps you go second against the decks you need to be able to go second against. You know, these decks that you have impossible matchups, it makes your impossible matchups possible, which is huge for branded in 2025. You know, I remember at my last OTS, I drew Perulia. I was maining Perulia and Foolos and branded. I drew Perulia game 1 going second against Mermal. I would have never won that game without Perulia. It could have been Foolos too, because then Perulia drew me into, I think, another Foolos or Perulia, and it was just game over from there, right? So that's just like the instance where it's just like, and even in 60, because some people are like, oh, I'm not gonna see my 3 of hand trap in 60 ever. Yes, you will. What? Like, if you play the deck across the tournament, I guarantee you will see it in that instance. And hey, maybe you don't, but it's something where you should up your chances. And then also, once again, it's not a terrible top deck, so especially into like things like Maliss and stuff like that. So it is fine, and it's also just, once again, a thing you can discard and side out for games 2 and 3. So do you disagree? Let me know down below. What was your favorite part of this video? Let me know what points you agree with, you disagree with. I really want to start a discussion on this with the branded community. Next video, we're going to talk about like Droll versus branded and like why Allure Darkness is just good. If you guys want to see that video, make sure this video gets to 150 likes and we'll release that. And with that being said, I stream every Monday and Friday. Please check that out. Also, check out my website if you want to help support the channel. Pick up my branded spreadsheet, and then also all that fun stuff. Subscribe today if you want to help support the channel. We just have 11,000 subscribers. Thank you guys very much for that. Also, follow me on Twitter. Join my Discord. Check out all the links down below. And once again, check out our streams every 6 p.m. EST, Monday and Friday. We'll be seeing you guys later. METAGAMESGX signing out. Bye now.